Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Dr. Shanman. I will be with you for this class as well as many, many others over the course of your 1 to 5 career. You guys, I assume, are not just starting, but pretty early in your program, correct? You guys are maybe started last spring, took 250, 251. Some of you, this might be your first semester, and you're getting a jump start. So you guys are in good shape. This class is a lot of information really, really quickly. And I think the challenge to this to this class is, have you guys taken 211 with Mr. Dufresne? A couple of you have, a couple of you haven't, or anybody else for that matter. This is really our first significant class on special education. So there's going to be a lot of new terminology, a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts that kind of come at you guys for the first time. And based on some feedback that I've gotten, I'm going to not change the content of this class really over the course of the summer, but I'm really going to start delivering some of it in a bit of a different way. So hopefully there's going to be some different emphasis for you guys. You guys will get something more out of it. But there are definitely going to be challenges, not from it being a summer class, but just from it being a very heavy intro class. So hopefully you guys are able to get a lot out of it in this short period of time, but do know that this is the beginning of our journey together. It's very much not the end. So for today, I'll give you guys a little bit of background on myself. I'll tell you a little bit about the scope of this class and what we're going to be covering, a couple of resources that are going to be available to you, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. If at any point you guys have any questions, I have the chat box open, so you can either type in the chat box, or you are more than welcome to turn on your microphones and participate as you guys want. All right. So as I said, my name is Dr. Shanman. This is the beginning of my, or I guess the end of my 7th year, beginning of my 8th year at Nichols, which is crazy to say. My background is in special education and applied behavior analysis. If you guys are taking 382 this summer, I think a couple of you are concurrently enrolled in 382 with Dr. Claymont. She and I are very close colleagues. We've been working together for the past 5 or 6 years, and that's what you will be learning about in her class is my background. So that's very much where I am. I've taught in self-contained classrooms. I've taught in inclusion classrooms. I've worked in homes and clinics. I've kind of been able to run the gamut in terms of interactions with students with special needs. So I hope to be a resource for you in this class and really beyond, long after this class, when it comes to anything with special education and special needs. Let's talk a little bit. Yeah, I'll do this. We'll do structure of the course first, and then I'll give a little spiel, and then we'll jump into content. All right. So Moodle is organized into week-long activities or modules. They loosely resemble the structure of the semester-long course. As I said, it is very, very quick during the summer. So I pare down a couple of the activities, or there are a couple fewer activities than we typically do. There are fewer group activities just because they're hard to coordinate over the summer versus the school year. So with that being said, all the activities are to be done individually. That doesn't mean that you guys can't talk to each other, that you can't discuss ideas with each other, but everything must very clearly be your own work, all right? There is a midterm exam in this class. This is the only class of the 5 or 6 different um, uh, 1 to 5 classes that I teach. It's the only one that has any exam. Everything else is a project. This is an exam. That exam will be right around the 4th of July week. So we won't have class this week, but you'll have the exam instead. It's obviously we're on Zoom, so it's a take-home exam. Part 1 is to be done without any resources in front of you. That's going to be on your honor. There's going to be an honor statement that goes along with that. Part 2 is open book, open note, open resource, a couple of untimed essays. So for that part, you can use whatever you want. I'll obviously go over that in a lot more detail further on or later on in the course. All of the lectures will use this link, as you guys I probably got through the email, but it's also on Moodle. That will get us where we need to be throughout the semester. And then if you are not able to join us in person in the class, or you miss a class for whatever reason, there will be all the recordings will be posted to a YouTube playlist, and this link will get you to that playlist. So if you need to go back and refer to anything, if you want to rewatch anything, like I said, if you miss a class, you will be able to see everything on YouTube. All right. Our text for the semester is Mastro Pieri and Scruggs, The Inclusive Classroom. Really, any edition of the last 2 or 3 content-wise are probably okay. I'm actually operating, I'm way behind. I have the 3rd edition, which is out of date, and you don't want to use that. Terminology has changed, specifically as it relates to the label of intellectual disability in those older editions, the pre-2009 or 10 editions, I believe. It's still referred to as mental retardation. That label has changed, and there's updating of content and updating of the laws and activities. So you want to make sure that you're working with like the 5th, 6th, 7th edition as we go through the course. The content that I am going to be discussing in the lecture is really supplementary to the book. They go hand in hand, but I'm not going to be going chapter by chapter. This is what chapter 1 says. This is what chapter 2 says. So there will be some activities that I assign, particularly in the second half of the semester, that are based on the readings in the text, but it's not going to be either lecture and then read the same thing in the text, or read the text and I lecture on the same thing. So you really do want to make sure that you have both of those resources available to you. All right. There are multiple activities throughout the semester. I kind of rename them as I go, but for the most part, they're going to stay the same. Every now and then, there's going to be some discussion boards. I have general rules on how I score and grade discussions, so make sure that you keep up on that. The PDF lectures that you see later on, I'm in the process of updating those to PowerPoint so that you guys can print out your slides and take notes and whatnot. So those should be coming as the semester rolls on. They said there's our midterm, that'll be around July 4th. And then we have the back half of the semester, which is kind of more of the same, different content. All right, so a few activities. The midterm, there will be a final project. I change it, I tweak it every year, especially for the summer. So it'll look a little bit different this summer than it has in the past, in both either the full semester or the summer. So I don't know exactly where I'm going to go with it yet, but I will by the time the end of July comes up. All right. In terms of due dates, everything is due Monday nights at midnight. I typically have a little bit of a leeway but for that due date. But I really do try to stick to those due dates. Once everything is in, it becomes really, really easy for me to grade and turn things around back to you. I will fully admit that that is a struggle of mine as a professor, and it is something that I am always working on, getting you guys timely feedback. So if you guys do your part, and that helps me to do my part in terms of getting feedback to you in a timely manner. If you guys do your part in terms of getting things in, and I do not keep up my end of the bargain, I'm in terms of timely feedback, I'm generally more and more lenient with how I grade things. I'll give you full points and give you the feedback versus taking off points for missing components. So it starts with you guys making sure that you get your assignments in on time, and then the rest is up to me. Okay. Let's see. I do accept all late work. The later it is, the more points will come off. You will always get at least some credit. So even, let's say you forget an assignment this week, as long as you get it in by the end of the semester, you will get at least some credit. So the scores never go to zero. So always complete all the assignments to get the best possible grade. Again, as close to the Monday of the week that it's due as possible. And I will update those due dates within the assignment to reflect the schedule for the semester, okay? I'll put a calendar up here for you guys, but just so you can kind of note in your, for yourselves, let's see, Tuesday the 15th and Tuesday the 22nd. So not next week, but the following 2 weeks, I will be doing an all-day training at Max Charter School, or not all day, but a 2-week training at Max Charter School. So I will probably have to change the time of those classes. I think right now I have it written down for Mondays at 5 is my plan. If you can't make that, that's fine. I'll record it and we'll go on. But Tuesday the 15th and Tuesday the 22nd, I will not be, we will not be on this time. All right. For the what, 6 of you here, is this time for the next couple weeks and in July, is this a good time for you guys? Yeah. Sure. Okay, cool. For those of you who are watching at home, if this isn't a good time, but something around this, like pushing it by an hour or two, might help one way or another, I have some flexibility. So for you guys here, and for anyone watching later, if you'd like to try and join us without too much, like I'm not going to massively change those days. But send me an email if you would like anything to shake up, and if I can, I'll accommodate as many people as possible. All right. As of right now, I'm planning, I think, on having my office hours on Tuesdays before class, if you want to come to Nichols in person and actually do that thing. I'm not anticipating that anyone's really going to utilize that over the summer, but I am honestly, any day except for Wednesday, I'm available to meet via Zoom. So we can schedule meetings if you have questions, if you want to meet, if you want to discuss anything else. I'm available throughout the summer. There's going to be a day here or there where I'm not. And obviously that 2-week period where I'm working at Max, I won't be able to meet during that time specifically, but other than that, I will be available. In terms of emails, I try to get back to people that day. I always have my email open, so that's far and away the best way to communicate with me. I do have a phone, however, I no longer know, like an office phone, but I no longer know where it is. I moved offices a couple of years ago and that phone got lost in the process. So I think the phone in my office rings for Dr. Terrio, or at least it says her name. I don't know. If you leave a message, it sends to my email. But if you call my office, I'm not going to answer because my phone doesn't ring. The phone that's there doesn't ring. So don't do that. Send me an email. That's the best way to communicate with me. All right. Any questions so far about process or procedure or any of the logistics for the class? All right, sounds good. Okay, let's switch gears a little. Okay, you guys can all see the slideshow, PowerPoint? All right, cool. All right, so what is this class? This class is all about the inclusion classroom. This is about teaching students with disabilities in a regular education classroom. This is where I'm going to, right from the start, I'm going to be switching my focus and philosophy again, based on some feedback that we've gotten from some recent graduates. So I will start by saying this. As a 1 to 5 education major, which all of you should be, you are automatically eligible to become special education certified. The only thing that you have to do to become special education certified outside of your coursework is take the special education praxis 2 towards the end of your program. I believe that there is a slightly different, not residency requirement, but when you get to residency, if you choose to become or want to become special education certified, you'll declare that to Mr. hopefully soon to be Dr. Parfait, and you will have a residency experience in a special education classroom. I say that because as we enter, I say this now because as we start talking about this, you're going to, in this class, be entering a world of terminology, of process, of law that is very much adjacent to, but largely separate from the regular education 1 to 5 world. Some people have fears that if you become special education certified, you will only ever teach in a self-contained special education classroom. That's not true. Some people have fears of being a special education teacher because they are afraid of the behaviors that you see in special education classrooms. I don't want to say that those fears are unfounded, but those are fewer and farther between than you think. What many people don't realize is that regardless of whether or not you become special education certified, you will be a special education teacher. And what I mean by that is the 2 things. One, the processes and techniques and ideas that are successful with most special education students are also successful with most regular education students. So the ideas that you learn in this class, that you learn in 382, in 487, and which is a behavior management class, our assessment class, our collaboration class, all of the special education sequence is applicable to regular education and regular ed students as well. So there's really there doesn't need to be that like such a black and white distinction between special education concepts, ideas, theories, and practice and regular ed. Number 2, go find me a class in Southern Louisiana, in all of Louisiana, in most of the United States, in public school that does not have some special education component in it. And if you can find that class for me this year, go to the exact same class next year, and it will. Special education, for a number of reasons, some good, some bad, is everywhere in the education system now. That is not to say that every child is special education or needs special education or should qualify for special education, but between inclusion, between 504 plans or kind of our SPED light, and between push-in and pull-out services, every teacher basically across the country is working in some way with special education. And that doesn't mean that they're just teaching special education students, but they are interacting with either special education teachers, outside providers who are helping to support those students. They're working with parents and teams that are dedicated to the special education process. So the things that, again, even if you are not intending to become a special education teacher, the legal process, the theoretical process, the content process that applies to special education students is very much going to be applicable to you as a regular education teacher. If you are interested or know that you want to become a special education teacher, obviously even more so. This becomes your life. But even if it is not everything that you will be doing, it is going to be a part of your career as a teacher in some way, shape, or form. For the 6 of you here, do any of you think that think or know that you want to or might be interested in becoming a special ed certified? I don't even want to say becoming a special education teacher, but becoming special ed certified. Is that on anyone's radar of the 6 of you? Hannah? Isabel? Okay, cool, good. Lauren, you turned your camera on. Is that a, hello? And maybe for you as well, I don't know. And what I hope to, I don't know how I want to phrase this, but one of the things that I hope to accomplish with you guys over the 4 or 5 or 6 classes that we have together over the next few years is to encourage you honestly to go that route, to get that certification. If there is a fear of if you get special ed certified that you will only teach special education classes, I hope to counteract that fear with, if you are special education certified, you will get a job almost anywhere you want. And that's not because of the need for self-contained special education teachers necessarily, but rather the need for dual certified teachers in those inclusion, in those regular education classrooms. So really start thinking about that now. For those of you who are not sure or think that that is not a route that you want to go, look, if that's the case, then that's the case. And I'm not here to blast you otherwise. But if it's something that you're thinking about, keep an open mind over the next couple of years and really be thinking about what that might look like for you. For Hannah, for Isabel, for those that kind of think they know that they want to become special ed certified, we are working within the department to actually change our process to get you guys even more support, more questions being able to be answered, whether it's through myself or one of the other special education professors becoming your advisor. And we can kind of work specifically with you as a SPED candidate, or just making special education theory and practice that much more involved within the major overall. So I really hope that this is the beginning of a really positive step forward for us as a program in the special education sequence. Okay? All right. You'll learn a lot about me over the next couple of years. One of the things that you will learn is that I tend to get up on a soapbox and talk for 5 or 10 minutes about one thing, probably 7 or 8 minutes too long. This, I think, was probably one of them, but I hope it was worth it. All right, so let's get into it. What are we talking about? This class is, like I said, it covers a lot of material, it goes quick, but I think that all of it is really significant into building the picture of what special education looks like in Thibodaux, in Louisiana, in the country right now. However, in order to get to that point, I think it's critically important that between this week and next week, we spend some time looking at where we've come from and what we actually needed to do to get to where we are. So today we will kind of set the stage for what special education, what inclusion is and what it looks like. Next week, we will be talking about some of the legal cases and the history that led to the modern inclusion movement, and why we have what we have, why we have these what seem like overbearing and onerous procedures in place, and hopefully get some function to that, understand what they're there. We're then going to finish out the first half of the semester with the inclusion process. So what are the actual steps that need to be taken to get either children from regular education into special education and from special education back into inclusion, and what we do to support those children from a technical standpoint, not necessarily an individual standpoint. And then finally, we'll finish off the month talking about specific disabilities and how we support all students in the inclusion classroom. Those 4 points, the background, legal foundations, inclusion process, or that should say the IEP and RTI process, and specific disabilities, those 4 topics will make up the midterm. That is the totality of the midterm, those first 4 weeks. The second half of the class, of this class, is all about specific strategies for special education students to support them in kind of the areas of highest need in the inclusion classroom. So when you get children who are in special ed children who are in regular education classrooms, almost always, I don't want to say that, often, they will need additional support in some sort of foundational skill. So these ideas and curricula and tactics and practices that we're going to be talking about are not necessarily for teaching the inclusion student while they're kind of sitting with and learning general education curriculum, but what are some of the things that we can use for students for special education students who need additional support while in those classrooms. So the back end is really about struggling learners and how we can support them in regular ed classrooms, whether it's curriculum, content, classroom management. Those are all different areas that we are going to be looking at. All right, sound good? Cool. Any questions so far? Great. All right, so why do we need inclusion at all? Why do we need inclusion? Why do we need special education? These data are a bit outdated, but they have not changed in a way that would lessen the impact of this point. In 2013, the CDC reported that about 13%, 1 in 6 children, had some form of developmental disability. That has only increased. I don't know if it's all the way to 20% yet, 1 in 5, but it is above that 13%. Current education law, which we're going to be reviewing next week, mandates that all children receive what's called a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. All right. So you have 13% of the population that is required to be exposed as much as possible in all these ways to a full education. If we were to avoid the inclusion opportunities, that means that 1 in 6 children would need to be in a self-contained class. That is not practical, that's not efficient, that's not cost effective, that's not necessary, that's not appropriate for many of those children. The burden on the educational system would be massive if we did not have some sort of mechanism to provide some support for special education students in the regular education environment. Currently, over 85% of students with disabilities are educated in the general education classroom. So we've taken this last comment to heart for sure, and recognize that it is not appropriate for all those students to be in the self-contained classroom. 85% of students with disabilities get some part, at least 40% of their education in a general education classroom, 40% of the day. 50% of students with disabilities receive general education classroom instruction for 80% of the day or more. All right, so over half of our students with disabilities are basically taught all day in the general education classroom. Maybe they're pulled out for some additional math support or reading support or social skills support. Maybe they're getting OT services or speech services, but they are in those classrooms. That is a massive percentage of the special education population that is in a regular education classroom. So with this many students who are being serviced in the regular education classroom, all teachers, as I said before, all teachers have to be familiar with the best practices for both special education students and regular education students. Like I said before, regardless of whether or not you intend to be a special education teacher, chances are you are going to have a few of those students in your classroom. And it's going to be incumbent on you to be comfortable and to have the expertise to work with them. Not all students are in the regular education classroom for all of the day, as we saw. 58% are going to primarily be in the regular education classroom, but 14% are going to be in a separate class. Really, if you take the regular education classroom number plus this resource room number, you're going to get most of the way to this 85%, right? So if you have 58% that is going to be fully in the regular education classroom, that's your 50%, that's 80% in the classroom. Add your resource room, that gets you pretty close, plus some of this separate class, to your 85%, that is 40% of the day or more. The remainder of students are educated in what's called a self-contained class, which is typically what we think of when we think of special education classrooms. So those are going to be classrooms that have anywhere from 4 or 5 students up to 10 or 12 students per teacher. There might be some paraprofessionals in those classrooms. There's going to be a lower student to teacher ratio in general. However, some of those students who are housed in those classrooms, as we're going to see, are going to receive pull-out or push-in services, where they are going to push into the regular education classroom for some part of the day. That 40% that we come up with That includes things like lunch and recess. That includes specials like music or art or PE. It might include some academics. So if you have a student who is having lunch and recess, who is in a self-contained class, who's having lunch and recess with a regular ed class, who's going to all specials with a regular ed class, and who is uh, in the regular ed class for one additional subject, that's probably already close to 50% of your day. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways for us to get to those numbers, but it's not necessarily going to be that the students who are in your class to start the day make up all of the special education students that you will have contact with. There are a small percentage of students who are educated completely in a separate environment. These are students who, for one reason or another, are not going to be able to be educated in and with the general education population at all. So whether that's at a public school or a private school, they're not going to have the option, or parents will have opted out of the option to make that a possibility. There are a couple of different schools that are in the region that are specifically dedicated to educating students with disabilities. So there are very few inclusion opportunities for those students. And then there are also an even smaller subset of students who are educated at specific facilities where maybe behaviors are of extreme concern, and they do represent a potential danger to themselves or others and can't really be around a traditional educational system. All right. So with special education, so we have inclusion on one side. In order to understand inclusion, though, we have to really understand what the concept of special education actually means. In order to get to what drives the primary philosophy that drives special education, we have to understand this term, least restrictive educational environment. Has anyone heard that term before? You guys heard that term before? Okay. So when we say least restrictive educational environment, there are some caveats to that become very, very important. Can someone volunteer? What does that mean to you guys? Those of you who have heard that term before, what does that mean to you guys, least restrictive environment? Someone be brave. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. Someone do it. You guys can do it. This is why class is better than Zoom, because I can just point at someone.
As close to the general education guidelines as possible.
Okay, as close to the general education guidelines as possible. And I really like you kind of chose your words very carefully there. And I appreciate that. What least restrictive does not mean is the general education classroom. The as close to as possible is so important. It's easy when we think about behaviors. It's easy when we think about some of the things that automatically disqualify a student from being in the general education classroom. But there are a lot of different things that are not either not as obvious or not as black and white. So what is something that, I don't know how I want to phrase it. If you have a student that is significantly below grade level, but is compliant, can listen, can speak, can make friends, but they are not acquiring their academics. What is the restriction in a general education classroom? Why would the general education classroom not be the least restrictive environment? They're safe there. They have friends. They're physically doing okay. But why is that no longer the least restrictive environment?
They're not academically absorbing anything.
Yeah, they're academically restricted. So when we think about least restrictive environment, we really have to pair that with another term of free and appropriate. It is not appropriate for a student to be in a classroom where they are maybe 2 grades below the content that is being delivered. So therefore, the restriction becomes the acquisition of the actual material. The challenge with the full inclusion movement, I think, lies in this idea, right? The full inclusion movement, which means that there is no self-contained classroom, that we are only administering or working with students in the general education classroom, the inclusion classroom, is that it ignores this, that appropriate, and ignores academics as a restriction. All right. So when we talk about restrictive, we mean socially, we mean behaviorally, and we have to mean the primary purpose of education, which is restrictive academically. So with that, though, we have to understand that special education is not a placement or a room, but rather it is this continuum. It can mean one thing for one child and something completely different for another child. It can mean one thing in math for a child, but something completely different in reading for a child. It can mean that we exist within an inclusion setting. It can mean we can exist as a part of an inclusion setting. It can mean that we are nowhere near the inclusion setting and we are in one of those specialized facilities or schools. So the continuum, when you are a special education student, that does not mean any one thing. Rather, it means that all of these services and all of these possibilities are available to you through the law in order to provide an appropriate education in the least restrictive environment possible. All right. So as teachers, as advocates, as students who are studying special education, as people who are, hang on, Kimberly, are you here for 501 or 392? Yeah. Can you jump off and jump back on in like 10 or 15 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually going to do this. Oh, hang on 1 second, guys. Class 2 right after this. Enable waiting room. There we go. All right, where are we? There we go. I didn't help. There we go. All right. So with that continuum, it also means that you are going to have access to lots of different needs and opportunities for people to come and support you. So you're not just going to have a regular education teacher. You're not just going to have, you may, but you're not, you might not just have a regular ed teacher. You might not have a regular ed and a special ed teacher, but you may also have a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, a behavior analyst, a counselor. There are all these different specialties that are available to you on an as needed basis to support you based on your needs of that disability. All right. That's something that we're going to come back to time and time again, The things that you have available to you have to be things that specifically address the concerns of your disability. But once they do, they have to allow for that appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. All right. All right, so as I mentioned before, and this is something that we're going to be going over in a lot more detail in 2 weeks, but services can be delivered in any one of a variety of settings, all the way from a full inclusion classroom where you don't even have the support of a special education teacher, through some hybrid options, through self-contained classrooms, through specialized facilities. Again, no one individual, no one disability automatically places you in one or another of those settings. Again, there are schools and districts that have chosen to elect a single model. And I think that that is extremely problematic within the philosophy of special education. The full inclusion model as an ideal, the full self-contained model as an ideal, these are not the things that special education preaches to. These are not what 50 years of practice have shown to be best practices for students with disabilities. Special education, the law, IDEA, as we'll see next week, is all about the individual. People working together to support the individual, teachers coming together to support the individual, sorry, there we go. And school districts really understanding that the individual needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis to ensure they get the education that they need. All right, so what are the goals of special education currently? There are 4 goals that we are going to want to consider. The first is equal opportunity. Equal opportunity for an education and equal opportunity for access to American life. All right. Equal opportunity for education, I hope, should be plain and simple and obvious to all of you. We have a system that ensures that every individual has access to an appropriate education or a free education. That was not always the case for students with disabilities, as we will see. But that mantra of free public education definitely applies in opportunity to students with special needs. Equal access to American life, that's a little bit different, right? Our goal, not that we're going to achieve it, but our goal for every student should be to give them the skills that allow them the opportunity to access anything and everything that adults have access to as well, that neurotypical adults have access to as well. That does not necessarily mean that they will be able to fully participate, but goal number 1 is that we give them the opportunity to access. All right. Goal number 2, independence. To the degree possible, we want to make sure that our children have control over their education, control over their life decisions that we make, that we give them the skills to be able to lead towards as much independence as is wanted and needed, while still maintaining the best interest of the child. There are many stories out there of parents who have children with special needs where they make decisions that they believe are the best interest of the child, that schools or other caregivers or even the courts may disagree. And there's avenues to address those things, those concerns, but everyone should be acting in the best interest of the child, especially the less physical independence that the child has. All right. Goal number 3, productivity. Building on independence, the ability to be economically self-sufficient, the ability to contribute to community and society. Right or wrong, economic freedom is individual freedom within our society. If a child does not have, or we are not building towards the skills necessary for the child to have economic freedom, then we are not truly participating in their independence. What does that mean? If you have a child who is severely impacted or moderately impacted, let's say, and is going to have a very, very challenging time acquiring grade level skills in reading, writing, math, social studies, science, so on and so forth. Is it in their best interest? Let's say you have a 10th grader who is reading on a first or second grade level. Is it in their best interest to continue to teach them at that level? Or do we need to change the skills that we are teaching them such that they can earn a wage, such that they can be part of the community and society, maybe in a different way? It's a very, very challenging decision to make, but it's a decision that schools have to make every single year. Do we move away from an academic curriculum, and do we look at our job as an education system to teach more of a life skills system? Do we want to make sure that students are able to communicate with individuals in a way such that that individuals want to communicate back? Whether that's in a grocery store, in a car wash, whether it's in some other lower wage but wageful opportunity, right? We have to balance those different needs. So that's something that we'll be taking a look at as well. And finally, goal number 4 is full inclusion. This is the opportunity for access to, participation in, and full citizenship as a member of society. That goal of full inclusion is the goal. So when schools say that we have a full inclusion model, they are operating in such a way that they believe fulfills this goal. However, I think it's a really important process to understand that these goals build on each other. You cannot have full inclusion without independence. You can't have independence without opportunity, right? You can't have productivity without some level of independence, and so on and so forth. So if you build straight into the inclusion process and do not take the time to build that independence in a way in which that those students can contact that independence, you are doing a disservice to that student. It may not be that full inclusion is fully ready, fully available to a student, maybe until they're in high school, maybe until they're in college, but that's okay. This is not a one-year process. This is not a one-year goal. These are lifelong goals that are going to be, that everyone is going to have to work very, very hard to achieve. All right, so how do we achieve these goals? And I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. I've scheduled my next class too soon for this first week. But this will be our last thing for today. How do we achieve these goals? Next week, we are going to be reviewing the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, or IDEA, which is the current special education law. And there are 6 principles that are set out in that law that allow for us to ensure that we are achieving those goals. First, all children with disabilities will receive a free and public education. There's no, we cannot reject a student specifically based on their special education diagnosis. It does not specify who, does not specify what or where. It just says we have to provide that education. Number two, we have to have non-discriminatory testing. We cannot put unfairly label or place students in special education based on discriminatory practices. This sounds silly, or should sound silly now, but special education tests used to only be administered in English. If you were a foreigner coming to this country and taking an educational diagnostic test, you were going to be placed in special education simply because you did not speak the language. That is no longer the case. Number three, as we spoke about before, free and appropriate public education. This, combined with least restrictive environment, as we've gone over, set the hallmarks for what special education is and means. And we'll be coming to this a lot over the course of the semester. The last two principles go in a bit of a different direction. They have to do with the rights of parents. Special education is not dictated by the education system, but rather it is a partnership between educators and parents. It is very often the case that parents and educators disagree on what needs to be done for what is the best interest for a student. And in that case, parents have a means to fight back against the behemoth that is our education system. If you are a parent and a school is telling you your child needs special education services or does not qualify for special education services, and you as a parent disagree either way, you have the ability to fight back through IDEA to get what you feel is appropriate for your student. And with that, parent participation. You cannot have an IEP, you cannot have a successful special education partnership without parent participation. Again, we will come back and talk about this a lot in the next couple of weeks, but these 6 principles are the tenets of how we achieve those goals. All right, that is where we will stop for today. Let's see. So for this week, there is a quick activity regarding those goals and principles of special education. And then there's a movie here called Willowbrook 25 Years Later. My warning for that is that it is not a easy, fun, lighthearted movie to watch. It is graphic. There are some scenes that can be very disturbing. It is on the history of special education prior to the education system itself being involved. I don't even want to say special education. It is the history of institutionalization in this country for special education students. It's about an hour. I believe the link still works. I will double check that. So by next week, I would like you to watch that movie and little response to that as well. Okay. So those are your 2 tasks for next week. Please also read chapter 1 in your text. And other than that, I will see you in a week. Shoot me an email if you have any questions, and I will talk to you soon. 1 second. When I click the Willowbrook link, it says the movie is unavailable. Okay, I will. I'll get that fixed up. It'll be there one way or another. All right. All right. Have a good one, guys. Bye.